The River Corridor is a 220 square mile area of land on the government's Hanford site that borders the Columbia River, north of Richland, Washington. Equal in size to the city of Chicago, Hanford's River Corridor is bordered by roughly 50 miles of the majestic and powerful Columbia River. This river, a cornerstone of the region's economy and culture for centuries, is at once geologic, ecologic, and historic. Its abundant waters, shores, and wildlife have supported generations of Native American tribes, including the Yakima, Wanapum, Umatilla, and Nez Perce. With Lewis and Clark's Corps of Discovery expedition, the Columbia captured a nation's imagination, setting the stage for westward expansion and settlements such as the White Bluffs and Hanford townships. Today, more than 1 million people live in cities and towns downriver from the Hanford site. The river is a driving force of modern energy, agriculture, transportation, recreation, and commerce.
I've lived on the Columbia River since I was 10 years old, and it's an integral part of our life in this area. You know, we like to have it clean, or we take our kids to boat in it, play in it, and you know, it's an important factor that we take care of what we have.
We're going to try to turn it back to the wildlife. We do a lot of fishing up in the Reach. But since I was a kid back in the 80s, my uncle took me up there. Now I take my kids up there.
And I remember going out to the end reactor a long time ago, 50 years ago, when President Kennedy came. And I was 14 years old. And that was, so it has a memory with me. So it's pretty special.
It is here, along a free-flowing stretch of the Columbia River in southeastern Washington, that plutonium was produced as part of the Manhattan Project, helping bring an end to World War II and later fueling the United States nuclear weapons stockpile during the Cold War. In total, 9 large, full-scale nuclear production reactors and hundreds of support buildings and facilities were built and operated in the river corridor. Water was plentiful and easy to access, pumped from river to reactor, where it was used to cool the reactors, then returned to the river. These reactors produced nearly 2/3 of the nation's supply of plutonium from the 1940s to the 1980s. Hanford's 300 area, part of the river corridor just north of Richland, Washington, was vital to that process. The 300 area was home to more than 200 research, development, and fabrication facilities that produced more than 20 million rods of uranium fuel for the reactors.
We had a war to win back in '41, and we were on a timeline, and people scoff at that, but you know, we're out here cleaning it all up and trying to get it done.
I've been out here for 37 years, right here in the 300 area the whole time. Ain't too many people that can say that, I don't think. The big difference to me would be the fact that before, you know, we were fabricating the fuel for N reactor, and so we were building stuff up, making things happen, and now it's kind of now we're cleaning it up.
In Hanford's river corridor alone, hundreds of buildings and soil sites and billions of gallons of groundwater were contaminated with radioactive and hazardous materials, making the river corridor one of the country's largest environmental cleanup projects. Instead of leaving waste in place, the Department of Energy and contractors like Washington Closure Hanford are removing buildings and contamination that would threaten the Columbia River in the future. Since the mid-1990s, cleanup at Hanford has been focused on protecting the Columbia River for future generations, protecting human health and restoring groundwater. Efforts underway in the river corridor are supporting this important environmental objective. The goal is to clean up the land so that it is safe for activities such as preservation and recreation, and in limited areas, industry. In the river corridor, that goal is being achieved by moving more than 16 million tons of contaminated debris and soil away from the river. In Hanford's 100 area, all but one of its 9 nuclear reactors will be cocooned. Cocooning involves cleaning out and demolishing dozens of support facilities, as well as a good portion of the reactor itself. What's left is a single building on the desert landscape, sealed up safely for decades, until radioactivity decreases to the point that workers can dismantle the reactor cores.
A lot of the buildings that we had in the 300 area have now been leveled out and the grass is growing. The site that I was talking about at Dash 7 that we actually came in one summer, completely dug that burial ground. It had a thorium trench in, we cleaned that all up. Now you drive by it and it's actually back to sagebrush and the level land. Here at 61810, we've seen it go from the desert landscape to the excavation that you see behind me here with all the holes. And when we leave, it's going to look like the desert again. That's going to be pretty awesome.
You know, seeing the 100N area go from all those buildings and structures just to, you know, the open holes and the pits and the open trenches, and then get to see it backfilled and re-vegged. You know, it's amazing to see what this area is going to be looking like when we get done. You know, it's a good feeling to be a part of a team that's doing all this work in a safe and compliant manner.
It's a very honorable mission to be cleaning up the groundwater and the atmosphere and the area around here and making it go back to the way it was.
Cocooning Hanford's reactors is only part of the cleanup equation in the river corridor. Moving radioactive material away from this area is critical to eliminating the risk of contaminating the Columbia River in the future. To date, Washington Closure's team has removed more than 10 million tons of contaminated material from areas near the river, eliminating the threat to more than 1 million people living downriver while protecting salmon and other aquatic life. Hundreds of facilities were built to support the reactors throughout the river corridor. Today, workers are cleaning out and demolishing about 500 of these facilities, including exhaust stacks, laboratories, and experimental nuclear reactors that have dotted the Hanford landscape for decades. Washington Closure Hanford has removed nearly 200 buildings from the 300 area alone, from the 100 megawatt plutonium recycle test reactor, now buried at the Environmental Restoration Disposal Facility, or ERDF, to the 3 million pound vault that once stored highly contaminated waste generated from laboratories, fuel fabrication facilities, and test reactors in Hanford's 300 area.
We've just been working on the 340, we just got done with 340 vault, and the 309 PRTR. It was a long process to get those vaults out. Ran into some little bit more waste or remediation that will maybe what we figured, and prolonged the job, but it was nice to see them going down the road for sure.
While many of these images represent the final and impressive stages of demolition, it is important to note that these projects are highly complex and require extensive planning. Removing contaminated equipment and materials to ready a building for demolition can take months or even years. Removing contaminated soil and solid waste is another critical component of cleanup in the river corridor. Much of the solid waste resulting from Hanford operations was disposed of by burying it in the ground. Contaminated water was discharged to trenches, ponds, and ditches in about 1,000 waste sites near the Columbia River, contaminating the soil. On any given day, excavators and workers are digging up the legacy of 40 years of producing plutonium. Drums, bottles, and trenches filled with radioactive material are among the many items that lie beneath Hanford's surface. Workers are digging up this material and moving it away from the Columbia River.
It's really an evolution out here. 7 years ago, we did things a lot differently than we do now. I mean, we used to crush little bottles with a 450 excavator and sample them behind blast walls. And now we're mixing hundreds of bottles at a time. We've expedited our processes, and every day we're becoming more efficient.
To help put this work in context, the cleanup of 77 waste sites located in the D and H reactor areas was recently completed, an effort that on its own resulted in 1.2 million tons of soil and debris containing heavy metals, hydrocarbons, gas, diesel, oil-based liquids, and radioactive constituents being safely removed. Near 2 other reactors, workers dug an enormous pit to a depth of 85 feet, all the way down to groundwater, and they removed more than 2 million tons of clean and contaminated soil. More than 500,000 tons of contaminated soil were moved away from the river on that one project alone. Today, 2/3 of the more than 1,000 waste sites have been cleaned up, with some of the most difficult ones remaining. The millions of tons of debris and soil from demolishing buildings and digging up waste sites are being moved away from the Columbia River into a massive landfill that is specially engineered to protect the environment. Hanford's Environmental Restoration Disposal Facility, or ERDIF. Expanded with funding from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the facility has a footprint equivalent to 52 football fields at its 70-foot base and a capacity of 18 million tons. Up to 600 truckloads of waste can be placed into the facility each day. To date, more than 15 million tons of waste and debris, mostly from the river corridor, has been placed in this important facility. During decades of operations at Hanford, billions of gallons of water, some of it contaminated with chemicals and radioactive material, were discharged from plutonium production facilities to several disposal sites in the soil across Hanford, including the river corridor. Washington Closure's team has successfully and efficiently removed the majority of the sources of contamination, waste sites, buildings, and burial grounds that threaten to contaminate groundwater and the Columbia River. Because of the river corridor team's successes, additional work was added to our work scope, a testimony to the team's safety performance and cleanup progress, despite the discovery of many undocumented hazards and changing conditions during cleanup. Despite the tremendous progress, challenges remain, including removing a research and development facility with highly radioactive material inside and below the 324 building, and cleaning up 2 waste sites with highly radioactive and hazardous waste, known as the 61810 and 11 burial grounds. When cleanup along the river is mostly complete, the landscape of Hanford's river corridor will be dramatically transformed, mostly barren and close to its natural state, leaving only cocooned reactors, occasional yellow pilings that mark groundwater wells, and a few slabs of concrete in areas designated for industrial use. This tremendous progress is one that river corridor workers should be proud of. Without outstanding safety performance, the amazing transformation would not have been successful. Working closely with DOE customers, state and federal regulators, nearby communities, and other stakeholders, Washington Closure and the River Corridor team are successfully preparing the 220 square mile area for a post-cleanup future, bringing Hanford's River Corridor one step closer to being available for future use. And as it has since the beginning, the Columbia River, in all its majesty and might, will indeed roll on, a cornerstone of the region's culture and economy for generations to come.
It's really been a privilege. I've met all kinds of people, and we have done a lot, and we have something to be proud of.
It's been a good piece of history to be involved in and helping to clean up, and it's also nice to be able to look out and see the river along here when we're here as well.
We went 555 days with this project with Terranair and Envirocon with WCH, so with 0 accidents and 0 recordables, so great accomplishment for the group.
I enjoy the work, I enjoy the people, fine bunch of people.
I think the key thing is to finish on a strong note and finish where everybody can in a safe manner, but hold their heads high and finish strong.